The house was a silent storyteller, its walls adorned with pictures of laughter, love, and a life that once was. Each corner whispered tales of Emily, Victor's late partner, whose absence had turned the once vibrant home into a mausoleum of memories. Victor, now a widower in his late 40s, moved through these spaces like a ghost, his steps echoing the emptiness that had taken residence in his heart. Daniel, his son, had grown into a young man of 22, his features a blend of both parents but with eyes that held the depth of understanding beyond his years. Since Emily's passing, he had been Victor's rock, the one constant in a world that had crumbled. The house was no longer just a home, it was a sanctuary where Daniel's presence kept the shadows at bay. Their days had developed a rhythm that was both comforting and suffocating. Mornings began with the aroma of coffee, a ritual Daniel had taken upon himself to maintain, a small act of love that reminded Victor of Emily's touch in the kitchen. They would share breakfast in the nook where sunlight filtered through the window, casting warm hues on the table, a stark contrast to the chill in Victor's heart. Afternoons were quieter, with Victor retreating into his study, surrounded by books that once excited him but now served as mere distractions from grief. Daniel would spend his time in what had become his art studio, the room filled with the scent of paint and the chaos of creation, his canvases reflecting a world where color could pierce through sorrow. Evenings were when the house felt its most alive, the moments when father and son would converge in the living room, sharing stories, listening to music, or simply existing in each other's company. Daniel's laughter, a rare but precious sound, would fill the room, momentarily lifting the weight from Victor's shoulders. But nights were the hardest. When the world slept, Victor was left with the loud silence of his thoughts, the memory of Emily's warmth beside him now just a cold space in their shared bed. It was on one such night, under the weight of loneliness that seemed to suffocate, that Daniel decided to act. Victor lay in the dark, his eyes fixed on the ceiling where the shadows danced with the ghosts of his past. He heard the soft creak of the door, a sound so familiar yet tonight, it felt different. "Dad?" Daniel's voice was a gentle intrusion, a lifeline in the dark. Victor turned his head, finding Daniel's silhouette framed by the moonlight. "What is it, son?" His voice was rough with unshed tears. "Can't sleep. Can I stay here tonight?" There was a vulnerability in Daniel's request that tugged at Victor's heart. "Of course," Victor murmured, shifting to make room. Daniel climbed into the bed, the mattress dipping with his weight, bringing them closer than they had been in years. The silence was profound, filled with the unsaid, the unasked questions about what lay beyond this moment. Daniel's body was warm, a stark contrast to the cold sheets, and as he shifted closer, his head resting near Victor's shoulder, the boundary of comfort began to blur. Daniel's hand found Victor's, an innocent gesture meant to convey support, but it sent a jolt through Victor. The touch was different this night, not just comforting but stirring something within him, something he dared not name. He felt the rhythm of Daniel's breathing sync with his own, the closeness of their bodies bridging more than just physical space. They lay there, neither speaking, the air thick with the weight of their shared loss and the new, confusing warmth that sprouted from this unexpected proximity. Victor's mind was a whirlwind of emotions, grief for what was lost, gratitude for what he still had, and an unsettling, burgeoning feeling he couldn't yet define. As Daniel's hand tightened around his, a silent promise of companionship, Victor felt the lines of his identity, his role as a father, begin to blur. The night enveloped them, not just in darkness but in a new, complex intimacy, where the past and future met in the quiet breaths they shared, setting the stage for a journey neither had anticipated. The dawn had come and gone, but the echo of that night lingered like a melody playing softly in the background of Victor's mind. The house, usually so still, seemed to pulse with the heartbeat of something new, something forbidden yet irresistibly alluring. Daniel's presence, once just a comfort, now felt like a current, drawing Victor into uncharted waters. Days passed in a dance of normalcy, with breakfasts under the sunlit window, Daniel's laughter a balm to Victor's soul. But the nights had changed. The quiet had a new texture, woven with the threads of anticipation and the silk of unspoken desires. One evening, as twilight painted the sky in shades of romance, they found themselves in the living room, surrounded by the soft glow of lamplight. Daniel had been sharing his latest art project, his words painting pictures in Victor's mind, but it was the proximity, the way Daniel's knee occasionally brushed against his, that painted a different kind of picture. Their talk stretched into the night, the conversation flowing like wine, loosening barriers. With every laugh, every shared look, the air grew warmer, charged with an intimacy that was both familiar and foreign. Daniel's eyes, usually so expressive of his art, now held a different light, one that seemed to see right through Victor, into the chambers of his heart where new feelings stirred. Tell me about her, Daniel asked, his voice a whisper, coaxing Victor to dive into memories of Emily. But as Victor spoke, his words were not just of the past but of the present, of the warmth beside him that was so different yet so comforting. As the night deepened, their conversation dwindled, replaced by a silence that was not empty but full of meaning. Daniel moved closer, his body aligning with Victor's on the couch. Their shoulders touched, a contact that sent a shiver of electricity down Victor's spine. I miss her, Victor confessed, his voice thick with emotion, but his gaze was fixed on Daniel, seeing not just his son but a companion in sorrow, perhaps something more. I know, Dad, Daniel replied, his hand finding Victor's, their fingers intertwining. It was a gesture born of comfort, but tonight, it felt like a prelude to something else. The touch was gentle, exploratory, sending waves of confusion and desire through Victor. Victor felt his heart racing, his body responding to Daniel in ways he hadn't anticipated. Was this merely the echo of his grief, seeking solace in the closest heart? Or was it something deeper, something he had suppressed or never known until now? The room seemed to shrink around them, the space between their bodies a charged field where every breath, every heartbeat, was felt. Daniel's face was close, his breath warm against Victor's cheek, the scent of his skin mingling with the night air. I'm here, Daniel murmured, the words a whisper that seemed to stretch across the divide between father and something more. His thumb traced circles on Victor's hand, each movement deliberate, almost seductive in its tenderness. Victor's mind was a storm of emotions: guilt, longing, confusion. He wanted to pull away, to re-establish the boundaries that had always been there, but his body, his heart, refused to move. Instead, he found himself leaning in, the pull towards Daniel undeniable, like a moth to a flame. The night ended with them still close, the unspoken between them louder than any words could be. As Daniel eventually left for his room, Victor was left with the taste of something new, something terrifying yet exhilarating. He lay awake, his thoughts a whirl of color, wondering if this was just the shadow of grief or the dawn of a new, uncharted love. In the heart of the house, where light and shadow played tricks on the walls, Daniel's studio was a sanctuary of expression. His canvases were his confidants, capturing the emotions he dared not speak aloud. Each brush stroke was a whisper of his soul, a silent confession to the world about the turmoil and tenderness that lived within him. His latest piece was different. It was a dance of color and shadow, where two figures merged, their forms indistinct yet undeniably connected. The painting was an ode to the nights they shared, a visual echo of the warmth and confusion that had begun to define his relationship with Victor. Daniel stood back, observing his work, his heart pounding with the realization of what he had inadvertently laid bare. Victor, drawn by the sound of Daniel's brush against canvas, entered the studio. He paused at the doorway, his eyes catching the new painting. There was something about it that pulled at him, a familiarity that went beyond the aesthetic to touch something deep within his conflicted heart. Daniel, this is. Victor's words trailed off as he approached, his gaze locked on the canvas. The figures seemed to dance in the light, their connection palpable, almost tangible. It's us, isn't it? Victor's voice was a mix of awe and apprehension. He felt as if he was looking into a mirror that showed not just his reflection but the inner turmoil he was grappling with. Daniel nodded, his cheeks flushing with a mix of pride and fear. I guess my subconscious got ahead of me. I didn't mean to. No, don't apologize, Victor interjected, his voice soft yet firm. It's beautiful. It's honest. His hand reached out, tracing the air above the painting, as if he could feel the emotions Daniel had poured into it. The room was charged with a new energy, the art becoming a bridge between them. As they stood side by side, Daniel felt Victor's presence like a physical touch, not just comforting but questioning, exploring. This piece, it's like you've painted my heart, Victor admitted, his eyes still on the canvas but his words meant for Daniel. The confession hung between them, heavy with implications. Daniel turned to Victor, his eyes searching. I feel things, Dad. Things I can't explain, he said, his voice a blend of vulnerability and desire. Victor looked at him, really looked at him, seeing not just his son but a young man torn between love and societal norms. Their relationship had always been tactile, but now, each touch seemed to delve deeper, each glance held longer, charged with a new meaning. Without words, Daniel reached out, his hand finding Victor's. It was an act of connection, of seeking understanding. Their fingers linked, the touch no longer just about comfort but exploration, a silent question of what this could be. Victor felt the warmth of Daniel's hand, the slight tremor, the strength, and it stirred something within him, an acknowledgement of his own feelings that he'd kept at bay. He squeezed back, a gesture that was both a reassurance and a descent into the unknown. They stood there, in the quiet sanctity of the studio, surrounded by art that spoke of love in its most complex forms. The air was thick with the scent of oils and turpentine, but beneath it all, there was the scent of something new blooming, something that was as terrifying as it was beautiful. As they eventually parted, the physical distance between them seemed negligible compared to the emotional closeness they had just shared. Victor left the studio with a heart both heavier and lighter, knowing that each touch, each shared moment with Daniel, was now a stroke on the canvas of their evolving relationship, painting a future that was both uncertain and full of color. The evening had settled into that quiet time when the world seemed to pause, allowing secrets to surface. In the dim light of the living room, Daniel and Victor sat, the air between them thick with the unsaid. They had shared wine, the glasses now half empty, mirroring the state of their hearts. The conversation had meandered through safe territories, art, memories, plans for the future, but it was the silences that spoke volumes, filled with the weight of their unacknowledged desires. Daniel, emboldened by the wine and the intimacy of the moment, shifted closer to Victor on the couch. His heart was a tumult of emotions, but he let his instincts guide him. With a courage born from both love and fear, he reached out, his hand cupping Victor's face, turning it gently towards him. "Dad," Daniel whispered, his voice trembling with the enormity of what he was about to do. There was a question in his eyes, a plea for understanding or perhaps forgiveness for what was to come. Victor's breath hitched, his own emotions a tempest. He saw the vulnerability in Daniel's gaze, the unspoken longing, and something within him broke free. As Daniel leaned in, their lips met in a kiss that was hesitant at first, then deepened with a hunger neither had anticipated. The kiss was a revelation, a moment where all barriers seemed to fall away, leaving only the raw truth of their connection. It was soft, exploratory, yet it carried the weight of years of love, now painted with new, forbidden colors. When they finally parted, both were breathless, their eyes locked in a shared moment of shock and realization. Victor felt his world tilting, the kiss marking a point of no return, awakening desires he had buried deep. Daniel, on the other hand, was met with a mix of exhilaration and terror, the fear of having crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. "I'm sorry," Daniel blurted out, his voice breaking, the words a shield against the intensity of what had just happened. Victor shook his head, his hand still on Daniel's cheek, now a gesture of comfort rather than seduction. "No, don't be sorry," he said, his voice hoarse with emotion. "It's just, this is a lot to process." They sat there, the silence between them now a space for honesty rather than evasion. Victor felt the need to confront this head-on, to understand not just Daniel's emotions but his own. "Daniel, we need to talk about this," Victor began, his tone gentle but firm. "About what's happening between us." Daniel nodded, his eyes filled with a mix of fear and hope. "I know. I feel so much for you, beyond what should be there. I'm scared, but I can't pretend anymore." The words, once spoken, seemed to open a floodgate. They talked for hours, the night wrapping around them like a protective cloak. Daniel spoke of his confusion, of how his love for Victor had grown into something different, something he couldn't name until now. Victor, in turn, confessed his own turmoil, the grief, the loneliness, and now, the unexpected pull towards Daniel. Each confession was like removing a layer of armor, leaving them vulnerable but also closer than ever. There was fear, yes, of what this meant for their lives, for how the world would see them. But there was also an undeniable excitement, a sense of liberation in acknowledging feelings that had no place in the conventional world. The conversation was a dance of emotions, confusion, excitement, and at times, laughter at the absurdity of their situation. They agreed that this was uncharted territory, one they would navigate together, with honesty as their compass. As the night drew to a close, they remained close, not just physically but emotionally. The kiss had broken barriers, but it was their conversation that had begun to rebuild them into something new, something that, while terrifying, held the promise of a love that transcended all norms. The kiss had left a mark, not just on their lips but on the very fabric of their lives. Victor and Daniel now navigated their days with a new awareness of each other, a silent acknowledgement of something profound and unsettling that had shifted beneath the surface. They had agreed to keep this part of their relationship private, a secret shared only between them, but the weight of societal expectations bore down on them like an invisible force. Their home, once a sanctuary, now felt like a stage where they performed normalcy while their true selves whispered from the wings. Victor, who had always prided himself on being a pillar of the community, felt the sting of hypocrisy. He was teaching Daniel to be honest, to be true to himself, yet here he was, hiding something that felt so right yet so wrong in the eyes of the world. Daniel, on the other hand, was caught between the excitement of newfound love and the fear of judgment. His art, which had always been his way of understanding the world, now reflected his inner turmoil. His canvases were filled with darker, more intense colors, portraying figures that seemed to reach out from the shadows, longing for acceptance. One evening, they decided to attend a local art exhibition where Daniel had some of his work displayed. It was a public event, a place where they could be seen together, yet not truly known. The room was buzzing with people, the chatter of critics and enthusiasts filling the space. Daniel's paintings caught the eye of many, but it was one particular piece, an abstract of intertwined figures, that drew the most attention. Victor stood by Daniel's side, proud yet protective. He noticed the whispers, the subtle glances from those who perhaps recognized something in the art, in the way father and son stood too close, their body language speaking volumes to those who could read between the lines. After the event, back in the quiet of their home, they discussed the evening's implications. "Did you see how they looked at us?" Daniel asked, his voice a mixture of defiance and dread. "I did," Victor replied, his tone heavy with concern. "We need to be careful, Daniel. The world isn't ready for us, not yet." "But what about us, Dad? Are we ready to live like this, always in the shadows?" Daniel's question was a challenge, not just to Victor but to the life they were leading. Victor struggled with his response, torn between his love for Daniel and the fear of societal backlash. "I don't know," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I know I can't lose you over this. We'll find a way." The conversation was a dance around the truth, around the love they felt, which was both liberating and confining. They knew their love was genuine, but the shadows of society loomed large, casting doubts and fears. They began to live more cautiously, their affection expressed in stolen moments, in the privacy of their home. Each touch, each kiss, was a silent rebellion against the norms they were expected to uphold. But with every secret moment, the tension grew, the fear that someone might see through their facade, the anxiety of living a double life. Yet, in these moments, they also found a peculiar strength. They were building something for themselves, a private world where love was not defined by the expectations of others. It was a love that challenged them to grow, to understand the depths of their own hearts, and to question what true bravery and love looked like in the face of societal shadows. The bond between Victor and Daniel grew not just in the quiet moments of privacy but also in the public eye, where Daniel's art began to speak for them. His paintings, once abstract expressions of emotion, now bore the unmistakable imprint of their relationship. Each stroke on the canvas was a testament to their love, a declaration veiled in art. At the next exhibition, Daniel's work was the talk of the evening. Critics praised his use of color and form, noting the passion that seemed to leap from the canvas. One piece, in particular, titled Eclipse, showed two figures merging into one, the colors swirling in a dance of light and shadow. It was a portrayal of their love, of how they found themselves in each other's darkness and light, a metaphor for their journey together. Victor watched proudly as Daniel explained his art, his words a careful dance around the truth of what inspired him. "Love is complex, isn't it? It's about finding light in the darkest places," Daniel said to an intrigued gallery visitor. The praise for Daniel's work was not just professional, it was personal for Victor. Each compliment felt like a validation of their relationship, a way for the world to see the beauty in what they shared without knowing the full story. Back at home, Their private world was a stark contrast to the public one. Here, they could be themselves, exploring their connection without the weight of judgment. Their evenings were spent in the studio, where art was not just about painting but about understanding each other on a deeper level. They would sit close, Daniel with his brush, Victor watching, offering insights or silent support. One night, as Daniel worked on a new piece, Victor sat behind him, his arms wrapped around Daniel's waist, his chin resting on his shoulder. "I love watching you create," Victor whispered, his breath warm against Daniel's ear. "And I love having you here," Daniel replied, leaning back into Victor's embrace, their closeness igniting a warmth that transcended the physical. These moments were filled with the soft sounds of brush on canvas, the occasional murmur of conversation, and the shared silence of understanding. Their love was like the art Daniel created, complex, beautiful, and evolving. Each touch, each shared look, was another layer added to their relationship, painting it with the colors of passion and acceptance. Victor, who had once been so reticent about his feelings, found himself opening up more, not just to Daniel but to himself. He began to see his love for Daniel not as a deviation from his life's path but as a continuation of his journey towards understanding love in all its forms. He admired Daniel's courage in his art, in expressing what they felt through colors and forms, and it inspired him to embrace his own feelings, to see them as part of who he was, not a shadow to hide from. Their nights became a canvas for exploration, not just of the body but of the soul. They talked about everything and nothing, about art, life, and their future together. They planned trips to art festivals, envisioned a life where Daniel's art could thrive, and where they could be together without the constant fear of exposure. The passion behind Daniel's art was now palpable, not just in the paintings but in the life they were building together. Each exhibition, each new piece, was a step towards acceptance, not just from the world but from themselves. They learned to cherish the moments they had in private, knowing that in the sanctity of their love, they had found something rare and beautiful. As they lay together, the world outside forgotten, Victor realized that this love was his masterpiece, one that he was still learning to paint with all the colors of his heart. They were artists of their own destiny, creating a life where love was the ultimate art, and passion was its brush. The decision to move came like a moment of clarity at dawn, when the world is still quiet, and possibilities seem endless. Victor and Daniel had talked through countless nights, their conversations weaving dreams into plans. They decided it was time to step out from the shadows, to paint their lives on a new canvas in a place where they could be who they were meant to be, both individually and together. They chose a city known for its vibrant art scene and its open-minded community, a place where Daniel's art could flourish without the constraints of judgment. The move was symbolic, not just a change of address but a declaration of their intent to live openly, to embrace their love in the light of day. As they packed, each item they placed into boxes felt like shedding an old skin. Victor, who had lived under the weight of expectation and loss, felt a lightness he hadn't known since Emily's time. This was not just about starting anew with Daniel, it was about Victor rediscovering himself, redefining who he was beyond the roles he'd played, his identity as a father, a widower, now intertwining with this new, bold identity of love. The public revelation of their relationship was not without its storms. There was backlash, whispers that turned into shouts in some corners of their old community. But there was also unexpected support, from friends who had always seen the depth of their bond, from the art world that cherished Daniel's work regardless of his personal life, and from new allies in their chosen city who celebrated diversity. Their first public appearance as a couple was at an art gallery opening. Daniel's new series, Shades of Love, was a hit, not just because of the art but because of the story behind it. The paintings were bold, the colors unapologetic, much like their love. The gallery owner, a longtime advocate for artists living their truth, introduced them as Daniel and Victor, partners in life and art. That night, they stood hand in hand, facing the crowd. There was fear, yes, but also a profound sense of liberation. "We are who we are," Victor said to Daniel, his voice steady, "and this is our truth." Their new life was not without challenges. There were moments of doubt, days when the weight of societal expectations or their own insecurities threatened to pull them back into the shadows. But they had each other, and they had a community that slowly but surely grew around them, people who saw their love not as an anomaly but as a beautiful variation of the human heart. Daniel's art continued to evolve, inspired by their journey. His work was no longer just about the struggle or the secrecy, it was about joy, about the light of acceptance, about the dance of two souls in harmony. Victor, in turn, found joy in promoting Daniel's art, in being part of this new, vibrant world they had both stepped into. The chapter of their life in the new city was like a fresh painting on a white canvas, every brush stroke a new memory, every color a step towards authenticity. They learned that love, in all its forms, was indeed a masterpiece, one that didn't need to fit into conventional frames but could be appreciated for its unique beauty. As they looked back on their journey, from the quiet nights of confusion to the bright days of acceptance, they knew this was just the beginning. Their love was their art, ever changing, ever growing, a testament to the idea that true love, like great art, challenges us, changes us, and ultimately, defines us. Together, Victor and Daniel had painted a new life, one where love was the brush, and every day was an opportunity to add a new stroke to their shared masterpiece.